You've been in a relationship where the other person is constantly the talker and never listens to you. We've been in those situations. I've been in them many times. I'm sure everybody in this audience has as well. Now think about when was the last time you spoke to that person? For me, in those situations, I don't want to speak to them again. There's nothing of value created when one person does all the talking and never does the listening. To be a good relational partner, you have to be a good listener. Yo, what's up, everybody? This is the End-to-End Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Yun Nguyen, affectionately called the Ninja. You can call me Ninja too. This is the End-to-End Podcast, the Alpha to the Omega, the beginning to the end, talking about life, motivation, success, entrepreneurship, drive, leadership, and offering you morsels in this all-you-can-eat buffet called life. Back in the studio in Houston, Texas, as we start every episode with gratitude. Just as I start my mornings and how I end my days. Just want to say thanks. Thanks for everybody. Increasingly, we're getting more and more momentum with followers, shares, likes, and comments. So thank you all out there in the world, in the universe, for supporting the show. And if you're new to the show, what we do is the show is self-sponsored. I get no outside money for this, so this is done on my time and on my dime. So the only way we can organically grow the show to accomplish our mission, which is to positively inspire billions of people across the planet, is to share the show. And so if you like the content, if you found something interesting, you learned something humorous, just anything that you just felt good about the show, please do share the show. Like, comment, subscribe to all the channels on social media, especially YouTube, iTunes, and Spotify, but share the show. And I like to say, if your knowledge swole, share the show. That's how we grow. So thank you so much as we constantly, organically grow our audience. I'm so thankful for the opportunity to speak with you all, and more importantly, for you all to tuning in and listening and supporting the show. Back in the studio, man, just spent the weekend in Dallas, and I'll hit on that as our main topic. But the other thing I want to talk about is, a group of us started 75 Hard. I think we were 42 strong at the start of the year. And most of us, I think, finished just last Thursday. Thursday was the last day of 75 Hard. And so it was good, man. This time around, this is my third time doing 75 Hard. And if you're unfamiliar with 75 Hard, which many of you are, but if you've been listening to this podcast, you're very familiar. But to those new, it's 75 straight days, zero compromise, total self-accountability. And there are certain elements required to be done to finish the program. And that is one, maintain some sort of diet in accordance with your fitness goals with no cheating. So for me, it was portion control and intermittent fasting between 8 p.m. until I wake up at 3:30, 4 o'clock in the morning for my morning group training. So maintaining a diet consistent with your goals, gallon of water every day, no alcohol for 75 days, read 10 pages of nonfiction a day, and 2 workouts a day, so of 45 minutes each, separated by at least several hours, one of which has to be outdoors, and a selfie every day. So you just take a picture of yourself, not out of vanity, although many of us were, but out of monitoring your progress, right, to show progressively your achievements every day. And you do this for 75 days. And of course, there's no 75 Hard police coming around if you fail, like, hey, you didn't do this. It's entire self-accountability, entirely self-accountable. And so several of us finished and, kind of quote unquote celebrated each other. This is all in a group chat. Some of us were local to Houston. Some of us were around the country, and just supporting each other along the way and holding each other accountable, sharing challenges, sharing up times, down times, and all that. So that one, this is my third time, and through that group, this was a very fun experience for me. So, but I'm going to get to that in a future episode, because several of those people who did 75 Hard the first time want to come on and share their experience, which I will also share my outcome or my kind of digestion and meditation on this go round. But that being said, I went on a road trip to Dallas this week, watched my son play some basketball. And, of course, I went to medical school in Dallas, and so I visited with several friends up there. and had a few cocktails. And boy, it was good, but also bad. So over the course of 3 days, had a handful, 5 or 6 cocktails. Met some people for breakfast, met for lunch, met for dinner, whatever. Just kind of a casual social drinking. But by early morning Sunday, I was feeling really miserable. If you do 75 hard right, it's a complete detox on your body. Like, you are just food and water. I limited the juices, the drinks, the sweet drinks, and it was just full detox. And so, truth be had, the first couple cocktails I just didn't really want. In my mind, I didn't want it, but I ordered them just to be social with the people I was meeting with. And so by Sunday, it was just this fog of a haze went over my mindset, on top of my allergies. And on top of that, I could tell, my body still looked in shape because I was still working out. I'm still maintaining the workouts, at least once a day. And like for this morning, I did the 2 a day. So my body looked good, but it felt heavy. And it just reminded me of how dramatic of a change was made during the 75 hard process till after. And having had the drinks and getting a little loose with my diet and a little more fried stuff, I felt terrible, man. So by the time Sunday evening rolled around, I was like, man, I got to get back on it, back on the 75 quote hard regimen, even though I'm not doing the 75 hard. So the discipline in just doing no alcohol, keeping that diet, working out, still reading the 10 pages, all that is actually is a lifestyle change for me. So because I just don't like that feeling of getting that fogginess and that heaviness on my body. So huge. It was good in that I was able to contrast that healthier lifestyle, quote unquote healthier lifestyle, to just 1 or 2 days of a little bit less than healthy lifestyle, and then the effect on my body. So I am back on a quote unquote 75 hard regimen, although I'm not doing the 75 hard program. So it's just kind of an update on that, but I'm feeling good now. Now it's kind of like re-detoxifying my body after yesterday and the start of today, just straight water and good eating. But again, up in Dallas. And so just to talk about that and into the specific topic of this show, which is relationships. When I was in Dallas, I met with several people, and in review, these were guys that I've known for, almost 25 years. And it got me to thinking, like, I think 2 guys I went to medical school with, so we're talking like 95 to 99. Another guy who is a former professional hockey player, played in the Stanley Cup, high achieving kind of guy. I met in like 1999. So these are, and another guy that I met recently as of 3 years ago, but it seems like we've known each other forever. And in that context of these old, long-standing relationships, kind of like brothers, it kind of spurred my thinking as to what does that mean to have those kind of long relationships? What is that a reflection of, or what goes into having those kind of long relationships, and that you would call brothers, like you would be called, almost like family, and just the broad idea of relationships in general. So as I reflected on that, I came up with some conclusions as about these long-term relationships. And the reality is I would say that your types of relationships that you have is deep down a reflection of you. Now, I'm going to repeat that. Your types of relationships with outside people, not talking about family by blood, but just people. The depth of those relationships, or whether you have deep relationships or long-standing relationships, is a reflection of you. For example, if you're known to just use people, right, take advantage of them, go into relationships thinking, what can I get out of it? You're not going to have a lot of long-term relationships because those bridges get burned quick, real quick. And so knowing that, if you're trying to associate with somebody else who does not have long-standing relationships, you have to kind of wonder, okay, what kind of person is that? Is that a person who just uses people up and puts them out? Right? So in the context of this, your relationships that you have and whether or not you have these long ones is a reflection of you. And I'll go into what I think goes into building those type of long-term relationships and how it should reflect the values in you that are of quality. Because those long-term relationships are quality relationships. It's hard to build one to last that long. Okay, so I'm going to go into that in a minute, but just in terms of relationships in general, let's talk about types of relationships. Obviously, I look at them like concentric circles, kind of like a bullseye target with circles going out. And the further out they are, the looser the relationship, right? So in the tight bullseye, that would be your closest relationships. It could be your family, could be your spouse, could be your best friend, could be, it could be people that you would call family that are unrelated. Remember several podcasts ago, I said, family is built on shared values, not necessarily by blood, right? Those kind of relationships, that's that bullseye circle. Well, let me start. The bullseye in the middle is you, and then the closest circle would be that set of really, really, really close by blood type relationships where you would basically do anything for them and they would do anything for you, right? That kind of relationship. Outside of that would be kind of your acquaintances and friends, like just kind of guys or gals you just get along with, but they're not tight with you like that. Like you'd go out with them, you'd hang out, but they're not just that type where you're just I'll do whatever for this kind of person. Beyond that might be like relationships associated with school or your coworkers, or kind of on a professional level where, just by vocation or by career path or what you decide to do with your life, you run into these people, right? And you have to associate with them, but not necessarily, you're not going out hanging out with them, and you're not doing outside curricular activities with them, those kind of things, that type of relationship. Beyond that would be relationships that I call transactional, right? You're relating only because there's an exchange of something, right? You're transacting, maybe not business, but you have something to gain for something to give up. Similar to that person, they've got something to gain for something to give up, but it's based entirely on transactional dynamic. And then beyond that are people like you just could care less about. Not that we don't have compassion for our fellow man and woman, but these are, beyond that, it's just if you happen to run into somebody across, along the street or something like that. So those are relationships there, would even be defined as a relationship, but those are people that you could care less about from a personal success business standpoint. So obviously, as from the bullseye out, the closer in to you as the bullseye, the deeper the relationships are by definition, because they're closer to you, they're deep. And so what is it about long-standing relationships? How does that happen, or what are the characteristics of these long-standing relationships? And as I reflect on my life, I have relationships that last multiple decades, but there's only few and far between of people within that. I would say at the moment, less than 10 where the relationships have been that long. I've got guys I can run with since high school. I'll call them up. In fact, 2 weeks ago, one of these guys, hey man, I'm in town. Hadn't talked to him in like 5 years, 6 years. Got time for lunch? Those kind of relationships. And, I'm talking high school. That's late 80s, early 90s. So that would be a 30 plus year relationship. So what are the characteristics? The first one, and there are three, okay? The first one to build those relationships is that it has to be non-judgmental. Non-judgmental. And why does that matter? because you have to allow that other person to become that other person. That person needs to allow you to become you. And so you can't become you if you're constantly feeling like you're being judged. Right? If you're constantly feeling like you're being judged, you're going to either try to mold yourself to avoid judgment, and that molding may be not true to who you actually are, or you're going to avert away from the feeling of judgment and get rid of that relationship. Okay? So there has to be no judging to build that depth of relationship. That other person let them be the other person, you be you. And there's overlap in the next main component, which I'm talking about, which are values. But there's no judging. The less judgment there is, the more each person can be the natural self. And if those natural selves mesh, great foundation for a long-term relationship. Like you're going to try to understand the other person, but you're not going to judge the other person. You're not going to say, well, why did you do that? Deep relationships don't ask that question. Deep relationships would be, okay, I understand you did that. Let's talk about it. What was your thought process? What were the factors that went into that decision? It's not why did you do something like that? Nobody wants to, it's kind of like an accusation, and nobody wants to feel that sense of being accused of making a bad decision or irrational decision. So there's a difference between a why did you do that versus, okay, I know you did that, but let's think about the factors that went into that decision. And you talk it out. And through that discussion, that's where the depth of the relationship occurs. Right now you're understanding one another better than casting a judgment or a blame. So the main factor I believe in building deep relationships is being non-judgmental. Do not pass judgment on decisions, actions, results. They just let them be the person they are. And you're helping each other understand the other person. And through that understanding, you build a common sense of the second component, which is shared values. If you go back to a prolific Q&A, I think was the first one, I'll go really into the concept of shared values and how with shared values, you can evolve together. And that's what relationships are. Shared values are evolving together. And along with shared values is also shared experiences. Okay? If your values are the same, then you have an understanding of the same perspective of the world, the things that matter. And if the things that matter to the other person are similar to the things that matter to you, then you have some commonality that you can build together on. Share the opinions and thoughts and knowledge and research and wisdom about those values. Similarly, in a similar vein, it's kind of a twin to that is shared experiences, because you learn about yourself through experiences. Whether these experiences are done together at the same time, like traveling, or if they're similar experiences done separately but in the same situation. Okay, so, for travel, for example, a very wise lady who happens to be my wife, she said, she told me before we really got serious together, you never know someone until you traveled with them. And I thought for a minute, there's a lot of wisdom to that, because traveling is what? When you travel together, you learn how other people deal with a lot of things about life. One, uncertainty. Not every trip goes as planned, right? Adaptability. When things don't go as planned, how does that person react? How do they deal if you travel internationally, how do these people, handle themselves in other countries and handle other people that may be in a lower socioeconomic status? Or how do they value other people, strangers? How do they handle themselves when for example, lost baggage, or the hotel's not right, or the bed has itchy sheets, even just the smallest little things. How did they handle themselves, with their toiletries and things like that? All these little hints and clues about the other person's habits or views on life, or the things that they do, or weird tics, or whatever it is, you're going to learn when you travel with somebody, right? But that's a shared experience. Similarly, I'll give you an example this weekend. So my medical school guys, we're all dads, and we're raising anywhere from toddlers to teenagers, or kids going off to college. And so although we don't hang around as families because we live in different cities, we all have the same concerns as dads, or the same issues or thoughts about raising children. We're all reasonably successful. One of them is a medical director at a major hospital. One of them is an interventional cardiologist. And, one of the main questions is, how do we raise unspoiled kids? Right? We all have different kids, but we all have that same concern, or the same issues around the values related to raising non-entitled children. And so we spent, an hour talking about it over brunch, right? So it's those kind of things where you're sharing values, sharing experiences. And oh, by the way, these medical school guys, medical school is not easy. I'm stating the obvious. But we've had shared experience in that, doing, 48, 72 hours hospital call while we were training, doing anatomy lab together, all of us smelling like formaldehyde for weeks on end. Just things that you do together or have done similarly builds that foundation for the sharing of experiences, knowledge, and values. And so when the other person has gone through the same stuff you have, or are concerned about the same stuff you're concerned with, it's easy to have depth of discussion, depth of knowledge, and those roots for those long-term relationships start growing really, really deep and getting a firm hold into the soil beneath to build on a long-term relationship. So going back, it's non-judgmental, being non-judgmental towards each other, and sharing some values and experiences together. And then the last component of having long-term relationships, long-standing relationships, is twofold: listening and giving. Listening and giving. Have you ever, I'm sure a lot of us, you could share the same experiences. You've been in a relationship where the other person is constantly the talker and never listens to you. We've been in those situations. I've been in them many times. I'm sure everybody in this audience has as well. Now think about when was the last time you spoke to that person? For me, in those situations, I don't want to speak to them again, because there's nothing gained. I shouldn't say gained. There's nothing of value created when one person does all the talking and never does the listening. To be a good relational partner, you have to be a good listener, right? It happens in my vocation as when I went through medical training and as a lawyer and a business guy. You'll learn, and I've learned, that the more you listen, the more what? The more value you can bring to the relationship. That's the giving. Okay, so listening and giving are intertwined. The more you listen, the more you understand the dynamic, the situation, whatever it is, and then the more value you can put in your response. And so the more value you put in the response, or the value you give to the relationship, the more the other side of the relationship perceives they get out of the relationship. If you listen, if we're talking, and for those that are just audio only, I'm kind of pointing to the camera every time. But if we're talking and I'm listening and you're just kind of venting, whatever, and then I patiently wait and give my response and add a lot of value to where you learn something in my response, what are the chances are you're going to feel good about the relationship? It's going to be very high. And so then you keep building on that. And if the other person in the dynamic is a good listener, they can bring value to the conversation. or the relationship. And so it's a constant value add in the relationship the more both sides listen. The more both sides listen. And part of that listening also is not just giving of value, but giving of your interest, your time, and compassion. All my long-standing relationships, if I know I'm going to meet with somebody I've known a long time, first, it's kind of it's not structured such way, but it's the way I give my attention, right, to these people. Number one, and write this down. How are you doing? So one, you're giving your attention to how the other person's doing, either that day or in life. Number two, if they have family, how's their family doing? They always got to have family, either their own kids or their parents or wherever family they have. How's your family? Right? So now you're giving attention to the people they really care about, presumptively. And then we get to talking about life and business and all that other stuff. Because there's an order, there's a priority. In these type of deep personal relationships, it's about the person, their well-being, their family, the people they care about most. And then it's about business or whatever it is. Right? Because when you go in that order or that dynamic, it builds a sense of warmth that, hey, that this dynamic is about us as individuals, as human beings. It's not about a transaction, that type of distant relationship. It's not about, hey, what can I get from you? What can you get from me? It's, no, how are you? How you feeling? How's your well-being? How's your mental? How's your physical? How's your health? Right? Now we go to, how's your family? How's your wife, man? She doing okay? How are the kids? And just out of those simple questions, you'll bleed into other topics around that. Oh man, I'm getting old, my joints are hurting, and then you start talking about that. Maybe y'all share the same injury, and so you're like, well, this is what I did. Well, okay, maybe try that. So then you're building understanding, common ground, common values, common experiences, again, to increase the bond for that long-standing relationship. Okay, so giving of time, attention, your focus, listening. Okay, so is this a one recipe for long-term relationships? No, this is definitely not. But these are the things as I reflected on the weekend. It's very uncommon to have these friendships that last multi-decades. And for me, it's with, like I said, 10 or so people, which is quite a bit in my opinion, where it could be, I don't talk to these people for years. And then all of a sudden, hey man, I'm in town. You want to meet up? Yeah, let's go. It's just like that. It's just wild that way. But overall, when you have these long-standing relationships, it just makes life so much richer. It just enriches the living experience. I mean, money is there, success is there, of course, the fancy house, fancy cars, fancy toys, all that stuff. But life is really built around relationships, and you'll understand this as you get more and more successful. It's really about relationships. And I've talked to many people on their last hours of life, and it's not, what car I drove, what house I lived in, what places I've been. It's none of that. Usually the conversation is about people and the lives you've impacted or you've had, good relationships with. So this is a very key and critical area of life, an aspect of life that I think is overlooked when people are so dialed in on success, or, people are just selfish and always looking for things about what can they gain for themselves in their dynamic with other people. So I encourage you, highly encourage you, if you can, have the building blocks and build these long-standing relationships that just can last you your whole life and will always bring a smile to your face. I promise you that. When you think about the things you talk about or the shit you've been through together or whatever, it for me at least, it just kind of makes my heart race a little bit, makes me excited about life, and just enriches the memories and the experiences. And it also gives me something to look forward to in the future. Like, man, I can't wait till we get together again. Those kind of things. So again, just as a reminder, foundations to build long-standing, multi-decade friendships and relationships, right? Number 1, be non-judgmental. Non-judgmental. Number 2, identify and hone in on shared values and experiences together. And then number 3, listen and give. Listen and give. They're correlated. They're tied together. Listen and give to the other person. Your time, your value, your thoughts, opinions. But most importantly, listen first before you give those things. All right. This has been another episode of the End-to-End Podcast. Happy to be here. It's been a while since we've had a guest on the show, so I think we're planning for the next couple episodes to be guest shows. So if we do, look forward to bringing you those. But again, as always, very, very grateful for your time, attention, for your likes, and more importantly, your shares. If you found value in the show and your knowledge grew, if your knowledge gets swole, share the show. That's how we grow. If you found value, if you just were inspired by the show in any way, please do share the show. That's how we get to our mission. That's how we accomplish our mission together to affect the lives of billions across this planet in a positive and inspirational way. Please do share the show. That's how we grow. Looking forward to bringing you another episode next week and more in the future. Thanks for listening.